warrior, soldier, man at arms, get down. Scars on my hands and arms, hit town.
Aliens take Billy Meier back to meet Jesus. Billy Meier has friends from the Pleiades. At the age of 19, Billy Meier is taken back to meet Jesus. At age 19, Edward is not yet called Billy Meier, but I will call him Billy here because that's how we know him today. Billy Meier was instructed from the age of about 5 years old by the Pleiadians. At the time he meets Jesus, he has a teacher named Ascot, and she is from the Dal universe. She replaced Semyasi as Billy's instructor. I think Semyasi had an accident, and she almost died. And the people from the Dal universe helped save her. They didn't save her directly. They brought in some group that had the ability to save her, and they had to cut out part of her brain, and they brought her back. She was 130 years old, but that's very young because they lived to be about 2,000, I think. Part of the training for Billy was to visit various planets in our solar system and to do a little time travel. So he's taken back to see the dinosaurs, and he brings his camera with him and takes pictures. Randall Winters has many of the photographs, and they're shown on YouTube. Winters tells this amazing story of when they met Jesus, and I want to tell you the story briefly and then give you the video name so you can watch the series yourself. From about video 81 to about 86 in a collection of 158 videos is where this event takes place. 3 of them, Ascot, Billy, and a tag-along Russian by the name of Jitsi, they go back to meet Jesus. This trip straightens out a lot of things that we thought we knew about the Bible, but it helps you understand what was going on in the year 32 AD. The people are very ignorant. They don't read or write, most of them. Jesus knows how, but he's not typical. Jesus did not die on the cross. He was never called Jesus or Christ during his time. His name was Emmanuel, spelled with a J. When he hears Jesus, the name, he didn't like it. He responded like somebody had called him Heathcliff or something. The story is humorous, enlightening, fascinating, incredible, and possibly true. Is time travel possible? Billy Meier thinks so. Andrew Basiago thinks so. Larry Solars thinks so. And all of them have done it, so they say anyway. All of them have fascinating tales to tell you, and all swear they are true. Al Bielek time traveled, but he's dead now, so you can't interview him, but you can still interview Preston Nichols. He was right in the middle of the Montauk Project, has a lot of information. So was Duncan Cameron, and he's still alive. Now back to 32 AD and meeting Jesus. Ascot and Billy are walking around Jordan. The UFO is parked nearby. And Ascot is a real nice-looking lady with long earlobes, and they come out to the front of her face, and that's how you can tell that she's not one of us, but she looks very much like a human being. Nice-looking girl, or old lady. I mean, I don't know how old Ascot is. She could be 500 years old. I don't know. So they're out for a walk, Ascot and Billy. And Billy's 19, you know, he sort of falls in love with these babes that, like Semyasi and Ascot, are nice-looking ladies. And he sort of gets these romantic feelings about them. At 19, you can imagine. So they're walking along, and they make the mistake of walking up on Jitsu, who is camping out. Jitsu is a Russian diplomat who is retired or something, and he's in Jordan, and he's traveling all around with pots and pans and so on. They walk up on his camp, and he pulls out a gun on them because he doesn't know who they are, and they're intruding. And so he puts the gun in their faces. They're alarmed, and they try to explain their way out of it, and they're willing to say or do just about anything to get, out of this situation. And Jitsu says something like, "You're not from outer space or something, are you?" And so what does Billy do? He tells them the truth. He tells them that Ascot is, but I'm not. I'm from here. So anyway, they become friends with Jitsi, and they invite him to go along, and they take him back into the UFO, and they travel back to 1300s France or something like that, 14th century France. And Jitsu is their tag-along now. So they arrive in France, and Ascot is having a conversation with someone she knows from 14th century France. And the Frenchman she's talking to knows that Ascot is not a human being, that it's an alien. And the Frenchman in the Middle Ages sees this battery-operated lantern that they're carrying and is intrigued by it. Jitsi sees all the antiques from the 14th century France, and these two instantly have a lot to talk about, and the Frenchman wants to know how the battery-operated lantern works, and Jitsu sees an opportunity to strike up a conversation with him and explain it and possibly get some of those antiques. And so Billy and Ascot decide to go for a walk in 14th century France, and when they come back, Jitsu's arms are full of French antiques, and the Frenchman owns the battery-operated lantern. Way, way, way ahead of its time for the Middle Ages. All this time traveling is done in about 1956. They return to Jordan on another day, and Ascot wants to take Billy back to meet Jesus, and Jitsi happens to be with them, and so he's invited to go along on the trip, like one of your schoolmates is invited to go to the water park in summer with your family just because he's there at the time. Jitsi is a very religious man, but peculiar, and he blames Jesus for some of the misconceptions that are associated with the Jesus story. And while they are going back to the year 32 A.D., Jitsi is saying that he's really going to let Jesus have it for all the bad information that's going around. He blames Jesus for all of the erroneous information and all the wars that have been fought or something having to do with religion. And Billy is trying to calm him down, saying that it's not Jesus' fault. And they're about to meet Jesus, and here Jitsi's about to spoil everything. So anyway, the craft lands, and the landscape is not the same, but you can tell it is geographically the same place. And they hide the craft, and they start to make their way over to where they're supposed to meet Jesus. They spot Jesus, and they start walking toward him, and Jitsi is going nuts. And just before they reach Jesus, Billy just pops him in the nose and bloodies his nose. Jesus sees this and attends to Jitsi briefly, then sends Jitsi over to his followers and asks them to take care of Jitsi while Billy and Jesus talk. Jesus has the ability to see into the future, and he already knows all the questions that Billy's going to ask. And he's talking to Billy as if Billy's the next Messiah. And he's talking to Billy about the responsibility that Billy has ahead of him. Billy, just 19 years old, doesn't seem to accept his role, and as it turns out, he never does in his entire life. He doesn't like speaking to groups of people, and this disappoints those who groomed him for the task of being the next Jesus in our own lifetime. During this meeting, Jesus admits that Joseph is not his father, but Gabriel is. Gabriel is a Pleiadian, and that explains why Jesus has such extraordinary abilities. I think the video is called Billy Meier Contact Notes 83/158, but you might go back to 81/158 for the beginning of this particular trip to the year 32 AD. If I tell you any more about this, it will spoil all the fun of discovery for you, so let's just end it there. Thanks for watching.
This while I'd rather do it by myself. Stack money, make music, put my product on the shelf. So many